Alright, in this video I'm going over how to think about elasticities and the way they might be used in a court case where the government sues two firms that might be trying to merge. So how would elasticities play out in that court case? And the example I'm using comes from Planet Money episode 438, which looks at the merger case where Bush, Anheuser-Busch, is trying to buy up Modelo. And the argument here is that Bush and Miller are these two oligopolistic firms that kind of look like they're colluding, and the Maverick firm, they're calling it a Maverick, Modelo, goes against that and encourages those two firms to keep their price low, even though Modelo is a small player in the market. The argument here is if you let Bush and Modelo merge, that's going to create anti-competitive conditions. And of course, that's the whole purpose of the Department of Justice, is to make sure that firms do not behave in ways that create anti-competitive conditions that are bad for consumers, that lead to high prices of things like beer. So the Department of Justice is going to sue whenever they expect that a merger is not good for the economy, and they have this big court case with lawyers and economists on both sides of the court case, and the lawyers of Bush, who's trying to buy up Modelo, are going to argue that no, this is not a bad thing for the economy, this isn't going to lead to an increase in prices, we're just buying up a small player, they're small peas, they have no effect on our price in general. And the Department of Justice is going to argue, wait a second, the existence of Modelo is keeping your prices low, and you're just trying to raise prices by merging with Modelo. So that's the argument that happens in court. Now, how do elasticities come into play? Well, I've identified three key elasticities here. One is the elasticity of the price of Busch beer with respect to the price of Miller beer. And of course, we'll figure out both the direction and the magnitude of these. And in particular, what kind of magnitude are the two sides of the court case arguing? And hint here, the two sides should be arguing different magnitudes of elasticity, or else there's no argument to be had. So the key here is, are Bush and Miller acting like they're colluding? Because the Department of Justice kind of suspects that. And the Bush defense, of course, is going to be like, no way, we're not colluding at all with Miller. So, first of all, direction of that elasticity. And of course, direction, I use my thumbs to figure out direction. If you increase the price of Miller, does the price of Bush seem to follow that as if they're colluding? Do they seem to move in the same direction pretty closely, as if people are meeting behind closed doors and fixing prices in an illegal way? So, in general, we might expect this to be a positive elasticity if they're colluding, and there's probably at least some degree of collusion. What about the price of Modelo with respect to the price of Bush? So the argument here is, if Modelo lowers their price, does Bush follow suit and also lower their price? So those go in the same direction, meaning it's a positive elasticity. And then, of course, market conditions. If market conditions improve, does the price of beer go up? And we might imagine that that's a positive elasticity because they go in the same direction. So that's just orienting us in terms of direction. Now, the Department of Justice's argument when it comes to, are these two colluding? Does it seem like when Bush raises their price, Miller raises their price as well a lot? Like these are strongly responsive to each other's prices? Or are they kind of weakly responsive? Maybe Bush raises their price because they're changing the ingredients and the new ingredients cost more, and Miller doesn't pay any attention, so there's no meeting behind closed doors. So the Department of Justice is going to argue that this elasticity is large in magnitude. So there's strong evidence that there's collusion, according to the Department of Justice. And of course, Bush is going to, the Bush lawyers and economists are going to make arguments that that elasticity is really small. There's very little correlation in the timing of when these two companies raise their prices. It has nothing to do with collusion. So this is the argument over the price elasticity here. And I mean, this is reality. What is reality? And I'm actually going to leave this blank. You can come up with your own intuitions about it. but really it's going to be a reality that the two sides are arguing over. What is the magnitude of this elasticity? And then the price of Modelo, is the price of Bush responsive to the price of Modelo? We notice that the price of Bush is in the dependent variable spot here. And of course this one, the top one here, we could flip the two and we should have a very similar elasticity, unless one firm is the leader and the other is the follower. And I'm not going to get into that here. So let's go to the second one. We notice that we want to know, is the price of Bush responsive to the price of Modelo? So if Modelo reduces their price, does that also cause Bush to reduce their price? And the Department of Justice is saying yes, that this is a large elasticity, that Bush is highly responsive to the price of Modelo, and therefore Modelo is acting like a maverick. That's the case of the government, the Department of Justice. The Bush, of course, is going to argue the opposite, that no, we're not responding to the price changes from the maverick. We're not responding to the lower prices. We're just doing our own thing, ignoring this Modelo. Modelo is so small in our market that we don't even pay attention to them. And there's no benefit to having them independent. That's what the Bush defense team is going to argue. And then we might come up to this question of collusion. Maybe we find evidence that, yeah, the prices do seem to be going in tandem. There do seem to be big increases in price at the same time for the two firms. So let's say real evidence makes a pretty strong case that this is a large magnitude of elasticity, in which case, what is the Bush defense team going to say? Well, they're going to say, wait a second, we know it looks like the prices are moving in tandem together, but that's not because we're meeting behind closed doors. It's because we're just responding to market conditions. And the prices moving in tandem is just having to do with the market conditions moving in tandem. Wages go up in a particular market where we make a lot of our beer all at the same time, so we change the price in response to that input price increase, and that looks like us colluding and raising the price together, but actually it's just us following market conditions. It's not really a thing. So in which case, the department, Bush's defense is going to say, yeah, there's huge responses to market conditions. The price of Bush is highly responsive to market conditions, as is the price of Miller, and we shouldn't be blamed, and we should not be accused of colluding. We should just be accused of responding to the market, which is a perfectly reasonable thing to do. And of course, if that is what the defense team of Bush is going to argue, the Department of Justice is going to say, nah, we think market conditions don't really change that much over time, and when they do change, it doesn't lead to these immediate price changes for the beers. They're not responding to market conditions, really they're responding to each other, they're responding to the conversations that happen behind closed doors. So this might be the way that an elasticity argument plays out in one of these Department of Justice lawsuits.